Sheng Shao You had always prided himself on his iron will. As an alpha, he had lived his whole life commanding respect and carrying the strength that came with his rank. But when his heat struck this time, it was unlike anything he had ever known. It came like fire racing through his veins, tearing down the walls of pride and leaving him trembling, vulnerable, and desperate. His body betrayed him with every breath, every shiver, every surge of need he could not suppress. It was Hua Yong who stood before him, calm, composed, and devastatingly in control. His presence filled the room like a storm that had no mercy. Sheng tried to resist, tried to push back against the overwhelming pull, but his body weakened the moment Hua's scent enveloped him. It wasn't just the scent of an alpha. It was something deeper, richer, more commanding. Sheng didn't know it yet, but he was standing in the grip of an enigma. A being who existed beyond the hierarchy he thought he understood. "Don't fight me," Hua murmured, his voice low and steady. His eyes locked onto Sheng's, and in that gaze there was no doubt, no hesitation. "Your body already knows who it belongs to." Sheng's hands curled into fists, his breath ragged as he tried to deny the truth. I don't belong to anyone," he choked out. But even as he spoke, his body trembled with need, his skin burning wherever Hua's presence pressed closer. Hua moved slowly, deliberately, his steps silent but heavy with authority. He didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to force anything. His calmness itself was a weapon, slicing through Sheng's frantic resistance. "You're burning," Hua whispered, brushing a hand along Sheng's jaw. "And only I can cool that fire. You know it, even if your pride refuses to admit it." Sheng shuddered violently at the touch, his body leaning against the hand he desperately wanted to push away. The heat inside him grew unbearable, clawing at him, dragging him down into a pit of helplessness. He hated it, hated himself, hated Hua, hated the way his body surrendered so easily. "No," he gasped, shaking his head. "I can't. I won't." But Hua's lips pressed against his ear, his voice a whisper that carried both threat and promise. "You already have." The words shattered something inside Sheng. His knees buckled and Hua caught him effortlessly, holding him close as if he had always been meant to be there. Sheng's body burned, his pride screamed, but in Hua's arms, the world blurred into nothing but need and surrender. The night stretched endlessly, a blur of heat and dominance. Sheng, the alpha who had never bowed to anyone, found himself undone piece by piece. Hua never rushed, never lost control. Every movement, every touch was calculated, deliberate, meant to break through Sheng's walls while wrapping him in a prison he could never escape. Sheng tried to tell himself it was just the heat, just his body betraying him, but deep inside, he knew the truth was more dangerous. Hua's presence reached places no one else had ever touched. His control wasn't only physical, it was absolute, reaching into Sheng's very soul and binding it in invisible chains. By the time the fire ebbed, Sheng lay trembling in Hua's arms, his breath shallow, his body spent. He should have felt hatred, should have felt rage, but all he felt was the suffocating weight of Hua's dominance and the terrifying comfort it brought. Hua stroked his hair gently, his voice low and firm. "You can fight me in words, Sheng, but your body will never lie. You're mine. You've always been mine." Sheng wanted to deny it, to spit back the fury boiling in his chest, but his voice failed him. His body betrayed him with silence, and his heart whispered what his lips could not, that Hua's words were true. The morning after was no easier. Sheng woke with the sunlight brushing against his skin, his body heavy and sore, his pride cracked like glass. Hua sat nearby, calmly reading documents as though nothing had happened, his presence as steady and unshakable as ever. When Sheng stirred, Hua's eyes lifted, calm and knowing. "You should eat," he said softly, as if they were discussing something mundane, not the storm that had consumed them all night. Sheng's chest burned with shame and anger. "Don't act like this is normal," he snapped, his voice trembling. You broke me." Hua's gaze never wavered. "I didn't break you," he said firmly. "I reminded you of what you are." Sheng's fists clenched, his heart pounding painfully. "I'm an alpha. I'm not supposed to." "You're not just an alpha," Hua interrupted smoothly, his voice like velvet steel. "You're mine. That is the only truth that matters." The words left Sheng trembling, torn between fury and something dangerously close to surrender. He wanted to deny it, to fight it with everything he had, but the memory of the night before burned in his body, undeniable and unshakable. His pride told him to resist, but his soul whispered that it was already too late. Hua rose, crossing the space between them effortlessly. He tilted Sheng's chin up, forcing him to meet his eyes once more. "You can keep denying me with your mouth," he said softly, "but your body will always tell me the truth." And with those words, Sheng's world crumbled all over again. Sheng Shao You sat on the edge of the bed long after the morning had passed, his body still trembling with exhaustion, and his pride hanging by a thread. He had thought that time would dull the memory of the night, but it only made it worse. The longer he sat there, the more his mind replayed the way Hua Yong had held him, the way he had whispered words that dug beneath his skin like hooks he could never pull out. Every fiber of Sheng's being screamed that it was wrong. He was an alpha, he was supposed to lead, to dominate, never to yield. Yet he had yielded completely, and the worst part was that a dark part of him had wanted it. That truth frightened him more than anything. "Why are you so quiet?" Hua's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. Sheng's head snapped up to find Hua standing in the doorway, his presence filling the room effortlessly. He carried a tray of food, but his gaze never left Sheng, watching him with that same unshakable calm that made Sheng's chest ache with fury. Sheng looked away, his voice tight. "Don't act like nothing happened." Hua set the tray down and crossed the room, his steps unhurried. "I'm not pretending nothing happened," he said smoothly. "I'm reminding you that it was inevitable." "Inevitable?" Sheng spat, his fists clenching. "You forced me! You took advantage of my heat, and you think I regret it?" Hua interrupted sharply, his voice finally cutting like a blade. He leaned in, his eyes burning with intensity. I never will. Because for once, you stopped lying to yourself. For once you let me have what I've always known was mine." Sheng's heart hammered against his ribs. His breath came quick, his anger threatening to boil over, but Hua's words left him unable to speak. He wanted to shout, to hit, to break free, but deep inside he knew that Hua wasn't wrong. His body had betrayed him in the cruelest way, showing Hua a truth he couldn't deny. Hua's hand reached out, cupping Sheng's face firmly but not cruelly. "Sheng, you've spent your whole life chasing omegas because you thought that's what you needed. But look at you now. Look at what your body craves. It's not them. It's me. It's always been me." Sheng shook his head violently, trying to tear himself away, but Hua's grip only tightened slightly. The Enigma's eyes bored into his, unyielding. "You think this makes you weak," Hua continued, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "But it doesn't. It makes you mine. And that's the only strength you'll ever need." Sheng's chest heaved, his pride bleeding into despair. He wanted to scream at Hua, to tell him he was wrong, but the weight of last night was still on his body. The truth of his surrender clung to his skin like an invisible brand. Hua released him finally, stepping back but never breaking eye contact. "Eat something," he said, his tone returning to calm. "You'll need your strength. This is only the beginning." The words struck Sheng harder than any blow. Only the beginning. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. For the rest of the day, Sheng avoided Hua as much as he could, pacing the room like a trapped animal. He told himself he had to leave, that he had to cut ties before it was too late. But when he tried to step out of the bedroom, his legs trembled, his chest tightened, and he felt the echo of Hua's scent lingering in his senses, pulling him back like chains wrapped around his heart. Night fell again, and with it came the fire. Sheng cursed it under his breath as the heat returned, fiercer than before, his body aching with need he couldn't fight. He gripped the sheets until his knuckles turned white, sweat pouring down his forehead as he tried to hold on. But the door opened, and Hua entered without hesitation, his eyes calm, his steps steady. "You're burning again," he said softly, almost tenderly. "Don't fight it, Sheng. You'll only hurt yourself. Stay away!" Sheng gasped, his voice breaking. His pride roared, but his body betrayed him again, trembling at the sight of Hua approaching. Hua ignored his words, kneeling beside the bed, his hand brushing against Sheng's burning skin. "You need me," he whispered, his voice thick with control. "No one else can touch this fire. Only me," Sheng whimpered, a sound that made him hate himself. He turned his face away, ashamed, but Hua's touch followed him. Patient, relentless, inevitable. And once again Sheng fell.